move on to Mary Helen. She wrote the critically acclaimed Migratory Animals, and in addition was a past Fulbright scholar to Nigeria, and as we mentioned earlier, Adobe Paisano Writing Fellow, among other accolades, which are I think listed in her bio, which is attached to the email. She currently teaches writing at St. Edward's University, creative writing at St. Edward's University in Austin. And we're very delighted to have Mary Helen have you at the residency. And I understand you're going to read something of your current writing for us, after which we thought we would open the floor up for questions to Mary Helen. We will try to do it where people can ask their own question, and if figure out how we can unmute you, and rather than use the chat feature, which may or may not be good for questions like these. Mary Helen, welcome. We're delighted to have you. The floor is yours. Do I need
First of all, I just want to thank you all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. So first of all, I just want to thank Alston for having me out here in this beautiful environment, and thank the residency and the people who work in the advisory board for inviting me. It's been wonderful. I have a 3-year-old at home, and so as you can imagine, it can be challenging to get work done in large amounts of time. So this has been a real godsend to get to come out here and work. So thank you. I'm going to read from a new book that I've been working on the last year or two. And a couple of things about this one. Essentially, the main character of this section of the book, the kind of opening that I'm going to read from, her name is Jenny Sweet. She's a middle-aged rock musician. But when the novel starts, her kind of longtime band is breaking up, and her marriage, which is to one of the other members of the band, is also breaking up. So that's kind of the landscape that we start in. In the opening scene, they are kind of playing kind of their farewell tour, essentially, and they are doing a surprise set at Burning Man. So some of you may have heard of Burning Man. If not, it's essentially a really, really big festival in the Black Rock Desert of Nevada. But it's really, really big. Thousands of people go, and they stay for a week in tents, wearing costumes, and there are like big art installations and parties. And for an introvert like me, it sounds horrific, but I know lots of people that love it. It also has what they call a gift economy. So you're not allowed to sell things or buy things. Everything has to be given. So that's kind of the background. I'm just going to read a few pages from the kind of opening, the kind of inciting incident for the book. So 2017, Burning Man, 7 p.m. Dusk, pastel light refracted by clouds of white sand. The last time Jenny Sweet saw her daughter, the world was lashed in gold. She thought Black Rock Desert was better in photographs than in real life, because with her steampunk goggles and the hand-woven scarf gifted to her by a woman dressed as a mermaid, Jenny Sweet felt under attack by beautiful dirt, digging into wherever cloth touched skin, fusing with the membranes of her lungs and eyes, muffling the sound of the amp. In the distance, luminous objects stood against the dying sky, a temple filigreed in silver and gold, tiered like a wedding cake, an arcing set of prongs like the rib cage of a whale, and a 2-story Doc Marten boot attached to a clothesline. The temperature dropped like a sigh of relief. Jenny looked for her daughter to see if she had put on a jacket. Of course not. There was 13-year-old Nico with one of the roadies by the edge of the makeshift stage, twirling cords of glowing neon plastic, seemingly mesmerized by the cheap noodles of rainbow light as she danced, limbs so liquid it was as if she had yet to grow bones. Ginny nodded at her guitar tech as he finished tuning her Les Paul, clicking it back into the stand. The crowd hadn't recognized them yet. Everybody else on the playa was dressed more like rock stars than they were. This gig, if you could even call it that, had been Adam's idea, to promote their final album with a surprise set at Burning Man. To Ginny, it seemed like a lot of trouble for a show with no tickets, no take, for an album by a band that was breaking up. Nico, she pointed to her daughter's bag near the tower of bottled water they'd packed in with them. Hoodie, please. Her daughter frowned, loath to cover up the sequined halter top she'd insisted on wearing. I'm not cold, she said. Ginny tried not to flinch at the new hardness in her daughter's voice. A man climbed the stage, microphone feedback, speaker reverb. Across the way, Adam gave her the signal, 2 minutes to show. The man was introducing them to a surprised and quickly gathering hive of desert people. Ginny found the candy apple red noise-canceling headphones and handed them to Nico, kissing her on the cheek, smearing a patina of sand across her daughter's skin. Mom, I'm hungry. Did you even bring any food? Ginny squatted and rifled through her own backpack, but didn't find anything edible. Can you wait? Nico pursed her lips and pointed at a tent 50 yards away. There's pizza over there. Ginny sighed. Fine, straight there and straight back. On stage, Ginny took her place between Adam and Jesse. They didn't have a frontman per se, but people liked to see a woman at the center, a little window dressing between the white guy and the brown guy. Though Ginny tried not to think of it that way. She played the axe like a killer, didn't she? And even wrote some of the songs. The Nightjars were one of those indie bands that had been elevated to a certain type of fame. They weren't so young anymore, and neither were their fans, but they were still cool. In fact, that's what people said when they spotted her or Adam or Jesse on the street. So cool, man, so cool. And that's what the burners were saying now as they yelled and swarmed, kicking up dust until their glittery faces and writhing bodies were obscured by it. So cool, man, it's the Nightjars. The Nightjars are right there. They're home, man. The acoustics were crap. And Ginny didn't even want to think about what the sand was doing to the equipment. It was like playing a concert in a dust storm. There was something surreal about the grid of tents in the distance, like the desert base of a post-apocalyptic warlord. And people paid lots of money, spent forever in a line of cars just to be in this heat and cold and sand and thirst with thousands of strangers. Temporary community building was what they called it. Ginny put on the goggles, which blocked her peripheral vision. She felt like a kid looking through the cardboard tube of a roll of paper towels, or through a kaleidoscope, colors shifting and glimmering into arrays of stained glass. 8 p.m. After the set was finished, Ginny was disoriented, stepping down from the stage. The amp feedback echoed, and she struggled to find her guitar case, tripping over a snake of chords. She was used to venues with professional staff, used to her equipment being shepherded on and off as if by ghosts. She shivered and looked around for her leather jacket. Her skin stretched tight across her neck and cheekbones. Her lips cracked and bled. Then Adam was beside her. Recently, he'd grown a small paunch that was partly disguised by the loose flow of his Guayabera rock shirt. The splash of freckles beneath his eyes made him look younger than he was. Out of habit, she angled her head for a kiss, but instead he leaned into her ear. Where's Nico? She bit her lip. It was so strange that her brain had to keep reminding her they were separated. She and Adam were separated. Ginny swiveled toward the steps and the undulation of roadies and fans. No candy apple red headphones, no sequined halter top. Did you tell her she could leave? Asked Adam, an edge to his voice. Lately, he was so quick to annoy, to blame her for things. She looked him in the eyes. They were the same height and could dance cheek to cheek like in an oldies song. When they first met, he wore his thick hair tied loose at the nape of his neck. These days, his head was shaved, a well-groomed beard covering the acne scars she used to run her hands across like Braille. She went to the pizza tent. She was hungry. Ginny tried not to sound defensive. I'll get her. Ginny walked languidly, not yet worried. Follow the smell of food and you'll find Nico. That was the mantra in their family. When Ginny arrived at the pizza tent, it was almost empty. A young woman dressed like Thor said the pizza was gone. They'd be doing another batch in a few hours. Did you see a 13-year-old girl? Curly hair? That sounds right, said the woman, but I don't know where she went. 8:30 p.m. Back at the stage, Ginny and Adam circled, checking in with their crew, shaking off people who tried to stop them and pat them on the shoulder with, good show, good show. Adam handed her a bottle of water. Someone thinks they saw Nico talking to a monarch butterfly. Not a particularly helpful description at Burning Man. What was also unhelpful was the lack of cell service, which meant that even if their daughter thought to borrow some stranger's phone, it was unlikely a call would get through. Don't panic, Ginny told herself. Be methodical. She scanned the nearby surroundings, trying to see them through her daughter's eyes. Flames shot up, describing ornate designs in the night sky. Fire spinners. Maybe they had lured Nico away, she thought, moving in that direction, passing a group of revelers, naked bodies covered in gold paint and elaborate feathered headdresses, people sporting leather jumpsuits and superhero costumes and furry boots. She picked her way through the weave of people surrounding the fire spinners, their bodies glistening as they kept flaming balls at the end of the thick chains swirling in continuous circles and figure eights. But no Nico, no girls in the circle of light. She'd been explicit, straight there and straight back. Why didn't her daughter ever listen? But the better part of Ginny knew that wasn't entirely fair. No child ever truly understood the awesome power and torment of their parents' worry. Now, as she searched for her daughter in the crowd, the refrain returned, the one that had taken up residence inside her brain ever since the pregnancy stick changed color. What kind of mother? What kind of mother? 9 p.m. Ginny tried to keep herself together by noticing and naming the elements of the body's fight response. Racing heartbeat, cortisol spurting like a fountain, the coppery taste of adrenaline in the back of her throat. She crossed back toward the major thoroughfares, referred to as the fallopian tubes, weaving through illuminated bikes, spokes clattering, riders snaking through the dark on their way to various parties and art installations and bars lit up in the distance. Ginny spotted a grove of luminous palm trees. As she got closer, she saw it was a dance party. She cupped her hands over her mouth and asked the bartenders if they'd seen a young girl, curly dark hair, sequined halter, 13. They shook their heads, sympathetic but uninvolved. Ginny noticed an abandoned skateboard outside the bar, and she hopped on it, just stole the thing. She was beyond caring. It had been years since she'd skated, but the body remembered. As she coasted along the road, zigzagging, trying to understand the confusing layout of the place, an image of newborn Nico flashed through her mind. So small and thin that the skin had hung from her body, and she looked like an old man with furrowed brow. She had been born 6 weeks early, traumatizing them with a 21-day stay in the NICU. Later, it had been important to Ginny that she transform the narrative for her daughter, to whom she always said, "You just wanted to join the party early. You were ahead of your time. The doctors in the NICU were amazed when you ripped out your feeding tube, ready to kick out the jams." What Ginny remembered most about the NICU was the struggle of trying to pick up their pink, wrinkly baby from the plastic warming bed without disrupting the web of tubes and sensors connected to every part of her body. Stripping off her shirt behind the thin curtain, Ginny had held Nico to her naked chest. Kangaroo care, they called it, thinking, you should still be inside of me. How can I protect you out here? The horror of parenthood, that anything could go wrong at any moment, that everything could. When she became pregnant at age 40, Ginny had sent off for special yuzen paper from Japan, covered in intricate patterns with names like chaos and devotion and noble delight. Ginny's father had taught her how to fold origami cranes on those long flights to Hong Kong as a girl, and she decided she would fold 1,000 of them to keep her daughter safe and lucky. According to tradition, anyone who folded that many cranes received one wish from the gods. So many small steps needed to transform the two-dimensional rectangle into a being of flight. Each edge must be lined up exactly. Every fraction mattered. Every mistake multiplied. This side, then the other. Symmetry that created the base square, then the petal fold, then the bird base. And only after all of that did you make the tail and the head, the wings last of all. Fold, crease, fold, flip. She didn't resent Adam spelunking into sleep in the bed beside her because she had a purpose. Fold, crease, fold, flip. 9:30 p.m. I'm looking for a girl, curly-haired, sequined halter, 13, possibly with a woman dressed in a butterfly costume. Ginny began stopping and asking anybody she came across. They shrugged and looked at her blankly. What kind of mother? What kind of mother? I understand what you're saying, but can you please not use the word costume, said a man dressed in what Ginny would call cyberpunk. A costume is what you wear when you're dressing up as someone else. At Burning Man, we wear uniforms or outfits. We are dressing up as underrepresented parts of ourselves. Ginny didn't stick around to hear the rest. Suddenly, all she felt was thirst. She was thirst. She stopped at a bar for water and drank and drank and gulped and refilled. There was a shimmery quality in the air around her, revelers moving in slow motion, sounds muffled. She circled the tent, talking like one of those wind-up dolls. Curly hair, sequin halter, 13. Curly haired, sequin halter, 13. Finally, a mohawked man about her own age held Ginny's arm and looked her in the eye. Maybe. Do you have a picture? Of course. Why hadn't Ginny thought to show a picture? She held up her phone. The wallpaper on the screen was of Nico, but 5 years ago, sitting on a rock in a Vermont creek. She fumbled to unlock the phone and scrolled to more recent photos. Hope lit a fire in her belly. The man looked at the photos and then back at Ginny. Nico with her button nose and beautiful corkscrew hair. After a seeming eternity, the man with the mohawk finally shook his head. I'm sorry, I'm sure you'll find her. Deflated, Ginny took back the phone, which had returned to the wallpaper. Sweet, open, 8-year-old Nico. The girl before she had secrets, before she had become so disappointed in her mother. In the picture, Nico's cheeks were still rounded with baby fat, goosebumps on her wet arms, mouth open and an expression of joy at having conquered the cold, beautiful swimming hole. Ginny remembered how Nico had pursed her lips, looking quickly between her parents and the boys further down who were jumping from the rocks into the deep water. But the boys ignored them. Nico had splashed her father, laughing, while Ginny stared at her, trying to memorize every beautiful feature, the faint chin dimple, the shell earlobes, the unself-conscious way she held her body. Raising a child was living in a continuous state of loss, the old Nico constantly morphing into the new one. In that faraway Vermont swimming hole, Mother and daughter had floated on their backs, fingers woven together. And Jenny had thought, one day soon, she will leave me for the boys on the rocks, but not today. 10 p.m. The hard-packed flatness of the desert, ground, and the immense darkness of the sky threw off Jenny's sense of perspective. Things appeared far in the distance, and then boom, were suddenly right in front of her. A massage parlor, a photo studio, a giant neon eyeball, and then a circle of brightly painted burn barrels filled with fire around which people warmed themselves like at a homeless camp. She hoped that by now someone had gifted Nico a sweatshirt or a jacket. Unsure of what to do next, Jenny began making her way back to their tent camp, praying Adam had had better luck and that Nico would be waiting there, annoyed at them for, quote, overreacting. As she skateboarded along, she heard the sound of crying, her chest tightening in automatic response. She traced the sound to someone sitting in the dust next to a bike. An androgynous chrome robot was crumpled and weeping. The robot looked up at Jenny with pleading eyes and said, I feel so alone. Having confirmed the crying didn't originate from a child, Jenny turned to leave. She felt a flash of anger that someone could be upset over something so abstract and banal when she had lost her fucking kid. She opened her mouth and she screamed. And that's kind of the end of the first section, at least as it exists now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mary Helen. I'm going to try to allow participants to unmute themselves to ask questions. That was exciting hearing that. Certainly hearing you read it is great too, in particular, rather than me reading it silently to myself. But one, I guess, question that's come up is, writing a novel during COVID. I mean, and then being a resident, any particular challenges, or is it sort of the same everything else everyone else is sort of finding during this time? Anything you've thought about with that?
Well, it is. I mean, it's hard in a couple of different ways. Part of it is we just, don't know what everything's going to look like after this. And so when you're writing a book, you have to be really careful when you set it. So like my book, I started before COVID, and it starts in 2017 and is going to move forward. But now suddenly, if my book is set in our world, there's this enormous change, right, just in the world that I have to kind of consider how to deal with in the future parts of my book. And also not knowing how this is going to all end up, it makes it actually really hard unless you're writing historical fiction or something where you're not in this time period to kind of figure out how to integrate that in a believable way when we're still like in the middle of it. But yeah, so.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's just sort of like watching movies now that were done pre-COVID, where people are, hugging each other, and sort of wonder how relevant that is. I'm trying to actually unmute people, and I'm sorry, I don't think I'm doing a very good job, because I'm sure others, might have a comment or a question, and
I'll ask a question.
Yeah, please.
Oh,
go.
Sorry. There's somebody else who tried to speak. Thank you, Mary Helen. That was riveting. I really enjoyed that. One question that I have for you is just very simple. Like, what interested you about writing about a rock star? What is it about that profession that drew you to? You said you were an introvert, so maybe you were a rock musician, or maybe you are a rock musician in a different life. But it is something that, as an introvert, you would have to imagine yourself into, I would think.
Yeah. I've always loved music, and my father is a music writer, and I kind of grew up with a lot of music. But you're right, I never was really that interested in performing myself, but I always had this fascination with the people who did do that. So I've always been really interested in that. And then I think also in kind of starting a book that had at least this one through line that's about motherhood, I kind of like the idea of playing off that juxtaposition of like, you're just average middle-aged mother who's, you know, but you're also kind of a rock star, and trying to kind of marry those together. This book is not, this character is not at all based on her, but I was reading Kim Gordon's, who was a musician, her autobiography. And I think she kind of talks a lot about just her parenting and how they moved to a small town, and just maybe kind of start really thinking about that, how you would kind of balance those two aspects as kind of like a middle-aged mom, you know, and not like a young rock star, but, you know, like a 50-year-old rock star. Mm-hmm. So hope that answers your question.
I would like to know if you can answer, did the character come first in your mind to write this, or did the plot? In other words, did the character that you knew generate eventually the plot, or vice versa?
Mm-hmm. There's definitely the characters, always.
That's what I was thinking. In all your work.
You kind of cut out at the end, Michael, but I think you were asking about the characters versus the plot, which comes first.
Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me?
He said yes. Mary Helen, did you hear that?
Mm-hmm. So for me, that it's always about the characters first, and I still, like, drafts into a book manuscript will be changing the plot. Like, I am really not very good at plot. Or at least it's not what comes to me first naturally. So I'm always fiddling with that. I always start with characters I'm interested in, and then usually if I write enough, then I can start to see a plot arc and start to kind of slowly work it out. The few times I've tried to come up with a plot first and, like, you know, think about it in advance and kind of make a plan, then the writing for me always just feels really dead. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm like interesting to me or maybe to anybody else. So for me, I have to kind of follow characters around for a while and then hope that I can make a plot out of it eventually. I'm still working on the plot for this one.
I've got a question, Alston.
Please.
You've worked at Paisano, and now you're at Caterina. I have two sort of follow-up questions. How important do you think it is to work in a remote location like that? And what does that add to your work to do it that way?
Well, for me, you know, I think when I started off writing, I wrote short stories. And that to me is like easier to kind of do in little pockets of time. But once I started writing novels, it's just really hard to hold the kind of larger sense of it in your mind at once. And that's when I started really needing at least long periods of time where that's all I can do. And, you know, once I had a kid, my kid's only 3, it's become harder to do that at home, right? So having these kind of places where I can wake up and just sit and stare at the computer or stare at a scene or print it out, and kind of think about the scope of the book as a whole has been really helpful. I also just really like being out in natural places, and it's one of the inspirations in my work. So for example, Paisano actually, as Michael knows, ended up in my novel Migratory Animals. One of the characters is a weaver. And actually I did some of the research for her career by interviewing another Paisano resident who is a weaver. And she goes to a residency that is based on Paisano in the novel. It's not a major part of the book, but it's like one section of the book, which totally came from all of my notebooks, things I wrote down when I was there that I observed, the animals and in the wilderness. So I just love kind of writing about the natural world. So both of those things make these kind of residencies really powerful for me.
That's great. Thank you.
One other question, that just in your life, Mary Helen, you've been an American expat. In your case, it was in Nigeria, sponsored by Fulbright Scholarship. I mean, in my family, you know, we were all expats too in Asia and in London. And just wondered if you have any, well, how was your experience being an American expat, abroad in a place like Nigeria?
Well, it's interesting. So I grew up, in Abilene in West Texas, in the same house that my parents still live in. And so I didn't do a lot of traveling until college, really. And that's when I studied abroad in Chile. And then later I went back and lived in Ecuador. And then, as you were talking about, later in Nigeria and in New England, different places. And I've actually written a lot, almost all of my work, 90%, 95% of my work is set in places that I'm not from, but that I lived in for these kinds of period of time, like Nigeria or Latin America or Boston or, even Austin or Houston, which I'm not originally from, even though I live in Austin now. But, and I think in some ways for me, it's easier to notice things about a place when you're just not used to it. I've never been successful at writing about Abilene. And I think part of it is because it's like a fish in water. Like I just don't even know what to notice, because to me, it's just home. Whereas when I'm in a place that's really new, it's almost like my antennas come out and I'm noticing everything, and I'm writing tons of things in my notebook. And so I think for me, I always tell my students too, if any chance they have to travel, even if it's not abroad, even if it's just to, a nearby town, someplace that they're, they're not just used to the same thing every day. It can be really, really good for a writer. So yeah, I'm really lucky that I've had those opportunities to do that.
Great. I'm feeling that I see a lot of mute buttons here that people are muted, and I hope people can, if they want to ask a question, can unmute themselves, because I've tried and I don't know what I'm doing. But if you do have a question, wave at us or something. I don't know. And if you're not able to speak, and if you are and we don't get to you, I apologize. In reading Migratory Animals, the main character is a scientist, and I guess would it be a atmospheric scientist, I guess, and I don't know if she wants to bring rainfall to the desert in Nigeria, and it just struck me as a Texan. I mean, and you're a Texan from Abilene. I mean, did cloud seeding in West Texas kind of play a part in that, by any chance?
Well, it definitely kind of growing up with that kind of rainmaker kind of mystical kind of idea was something that always interested me. So yes, you're right. Even though that doesn't really get connected in overtly in the book, that's absolutely one of the reasons I was interested in that. And one of the parts of Nigeria where I was is the Sahel, which is kind of in between the Sahara and the jungle. And that part keeps kind of moving, right, as desertification happens. And so it seemed like a kind of an interesting job to get to have. One of the things I like about being a writer is that I can pretend I have all these jobs that I could never actually have. Like I'm really not good at math, for example, but I get to spend all this time researching my scientist characters or my musician characters, and kind of at least briefly living through their experiences, even though I don't get to do it in my real life. So I love that.
Interesting.
I also just want to say, because I don't actually know you, but I noticed that Barbara Ross is on here, and I've never met you before. Hi, but I have this little notebook near my desk at home that I just put like little poems or little things that I find that I want to have near me when I'm writing. And I remember ripping out one of your New Yorker poems a long time ago. It's the one about the elephant, and this like they're washing the elephant, and there's a whole thing about the loaf of wonder and like the land of lakes. And anyway, I love that poem. So just wanted to say that.
I have a question about your creative process. And you said that that you're quite character driven, and not you expressed some lack of confidence in your ability to think plot first, that you think kind of character first. And I've heard other writers talk about their personal relationship with their characters. And in one case, a writer described his relationship as that the characters basically started to speak to him and tell him how to write his book, as opposed to him developing his characters on their behalf. And this, you know, I thought that was so exotic. I loved hearing the way that he was describing it. I thought there must be a hell of a lot going on in his head. And I almost felt a little nervous for him. And does that sort of string in, you know, like ring any ding dongs for you? I mean, do you have those kind of experiences with your characters? Do they talk back and tell you, no, I don't want to be going down this road in the dark. I want to be doing this instead? Or
yeah, not really. I do hear some of my writer friends talk about like they feel more like they're just kind of like channeling these characters, right? Like kind of like you're saying. For me, actually, I have to do a lot more work, I feel like, to get to know them. When I'm writing, I feel like the first few drafts, I'm spending a lot of time on their external things, like what does it look like out the window when they drive to work? Or what are they doing at their job every day? Or what kinds of things do they cook for dinner? And to me, it's almost like I'm unearthing like a geological kind of like strata or something.
Are you having a visual reaction? Are you having a visual relationship with your characters? Or do you actually see them? Do you see them in the car?
Yeah, so that's how it starts. For me, it starts very much on the surface, what things look like or sound like. And then it's like the next draft, I might start to understand what they're thinking. And then the next draft, I might start to understand what they're feeling. So it almost feels like I'm having to kind of like peel the onion or something. Yeah. So I don't have that experience of a character just popping up fully formed and telling me what to do. I have to kind of like, you know, kind of date them, get to know them, you know, wine and dine them for a little while before I feel like I'm really understanding them completely.
Before you go to first base.
That's kind of my process. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Of course, it's not a very efficient process because it means I have to do a lot of drafts, but I haven't found another process that works for me.
No, I don't know that you can talk about these things in terms of efficiency. I mean, I think that as artists, you create a path that, you know, allows you to get to a deeper understanding of what it is that you're trying to express. And I don't think that efficiency really should be part of the dialogue. I mean, yeah, I mean, as an artist, you probably think about how other people approach their craft. And maybe one day when you're sitting in front of, you wake up in the morning, you're in a cabin in the woods with no 3-year-old tugging at your, you know, and saying, do this, do that. Then, you know, it gives you a chance when you're sitting there thinking, okay, now what the hell do I do? Maybe you want to conjure the efficiency of somebody else's protocol or the way that they approach their work, but it doesn't work probably. When you try and change the way you approach your efficiencies, you get stymied, no?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly a great way to put it. Every time I think I found a shortcut and I'll try to do that, then it's just dead. The work is dead. Doesn't work. So yeah. I just learned I just have to kind of just be patient, but I'm not going to be the fastest writer, but that's okay. I'm at peace with that at this point.
Well, that's good. I mean, there certainly are writers before you that are might be considered slow writers, I suppose, because it might take them 20 years to finish a book. I think you're a little faster than that.
Well, that's true. I guess it's all relative at the end.
Does anybody wanted to go ahead, Barbara?
Oh, good. I was trying to unmute myself, and then I put the video on. I thought maybe then I would have you know, full body experience. So hello, everyone. And thank you, Mary Helen, for the shout out about washing the elephant. That was extremely gratifying. And I want to say that you created so much suspense in that portion that you read. And I think one of the devices that was so interesting was the time, you know, the time stamping, that you could viscerally feel the tension mounting because hearing the time pass instead of just the panic in the mother, you participate, I don't know, somehow that timestamp really created a sense of suspension and suspense and anxiety that worked very effectively. And I was just on the edge of my seat, hoping that Miko would turn the corner. I have a question though about how you got so much detail about Burning Man. Have you been there? Have you actually attended Burning Man?
Are you there, Mary Helen?
Maybe she couldn't hear me. Could you hear me, Mary?
No, I have not. Well, so first of all, thank you so much for the kind words about, that's very nice to hear, especially for a work in progress. But I have not attended Burning Man. The interesting, I thought about trying to go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think my internet is maybe not working that well.
No, you're fine.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, now you can, okay. Okay, so, okay. I mostly did research on Burning Man with YouTube, because these days people take videos of everything. And so there are hours and hours of people just walking around Burning Man, videotaping what they are seeing, or doing things about their costumes. And so actually all of that was based on either books of photographs and videos.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually like to go for research, but the thing is, it's really hard to go for a brief amount of time. And I'm not sure I'm willing to spend like 8 days camping in the desert. So, and this year there was no Burning Man because of COVID anyway, so it gives me a good excuse to not go this year.
The reason I asked the question is that from what I've never been, I would never go. That it's just like the end of the line for me, even though I've traveled.
And I apologize if I think my computer is like running behind, so I can hear everybody.
But it's a little bit of time lag. Well, anyway, I just, I've read a lot about it and I've known people who've gone, and it seems like you've characterized it marvelously. So I wanted to congratulate you on that too. And one of the things about Burning Man is the intricacy of the rule book. And you mentioned the gift economy, but there are all kinds of do's and don'ts, and there's, like I said, it's a rule book. So I'm wondering how much of that your characters will engage in, and whether the setting is secondary, or whether Burning Man as a cultural phenomenon will become somehow explained or investigated.
Yeah, it does come back. So that's the first section of the book, but that through line at Burning Man continues throughout the whole book. There's other characters that have through lines that are not at Burning Man. But it's true, there's like, they have a whole language of special terms and special relationships. And I mentioned briefly in this one, they talk about going home, and they're like, oh, the nightjars are home. And they have this whole thing about like real burners feel like Burning Man is their only real home. And it's a very interesting subculture. And so, and I do have a couple of college friends that are burners and that have gone a number of times. So again, it's that kind of sense of living through other people and their experiences in my work. But thank you. I'm glad that it was coming alive for you in that section. So thank you.
It would be a very scary place to lose a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Especially with no cell phones. I think now they do have cell reception there, but they used to not. So again, trying to figure out technology and writing a book can be.
So I have a question. I wanted to say also how much I enjoyed what you read. And I, not like Barbara, I loved the time element, but it's not only as she's searching for her daughter, but also the shifts between present and past time, where we're getting flashbacks that are so informative about their relationship and who these two characters are. I really loved it, and her intense feelings about motherhood were fascinating. I'm also wondering about if is this point of view always with the mother, and at what point do you feel comfortable with your characters' voices, and how do you establish those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's several really great comments. And I have to say, Nan, I love writing backstory and flashbacks. So my weakness is I usually have to cut most of them, because like in my early drafts, people will read them and be like, it's like everything's happening in the past. That's like something that it's a bit of a weakness for me. So this book, at least the manuscript, the way I have it now, the mother is one main character, and her pieces come back up at Burning Man. And then there's another character that actually gets a lot more time in the book as it is now, and that's the daughter.
Good.
And it's in the future, so the daughter is older.
Love it.
And so part of what I'm trying to, which actually is its own problems. That's why I was talking earlier about Alston. Was like, I have to figure out what the future is going to look like, But and so part of it is supposed to be this kind of like what really happened that night. We're trying to figure it out. But then also the daughter is, we know that she's alive. Eventually, she's alive because she comes up and she's older. But so for me, both of those characters are written in third, kind of an intimate, close third. And it's pretty rare for me that I feel like I understand a voice well enough that I really want to do it in first person for a novel. I do that more in short stories. For me, the close third allows me to be intimate with their voice when I can, and then other times kind of bring in information that they might not entirely be able to articulate themselves. So I do try to make their voices different, especially obviously in the dialogue, but that close third means I think there's a thread of my voice kind of going through both of their sections in this manuscript. So it's not like a super voicey kind of manuscript in that way. That answers your question.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm even more intrigued.
It does sound really exciting to think about the daughter looking back from the future. Not, as someone who doesn't write fiction and who isn't close to a lot of the craft terms, is close third related at all to the omniscient narrator, or is it something less than that?
It's a little closer to the character is the way that I'm using it. I mean, some writers go back and forth. They might have close third and then have omniscient. The omniscient, though, usually can see everything. And the way I'm doing this kind of close third is it's pretty much staying kind of like on the shoulder. It's almost like a camera that goes with the main character in that section. So it doesn't really pan around to other people's minds. It kind of stays with the person that it's with, but it's still the third person. It's still using she. It's not technically in her head, even though it knows her thoughts. So I guess in that way, it is a little omniscient, but it knows everything. It just doesn't tell you everything.
Thank you. That's enlightening for me. I'm curious to hear what other fiction writers who are here on the checkerboard think about the problem of COVID. And it was a surprise to me that you were thinking it was an issue that had to be explored and pinpointed as part of the present in which you're writing, because in a sense, there could be a floating time period where this is taking place, where COVID isn't an issue. And I'm kind of curious whether people, well, Andrew and Nan and Jennifer, whether they feel like COVID is going to be a presence in their writing from now on because it occurred. For me as a poet, I've only written a little bit about COVID, but it doesn't, I mean, I feel like I write in some sort of eternal timelessness, which is not exactly true, but I think poems have a little more liberty in terms of where they exist in time. But I'm wondering whether that's an issue that is preoccupying everyone who writes fiction, how to narrate a story with or without this contemporary reality. Andrew?
Yeah, I want to hear Andrew.
You have to unmute. And, can you hear me, Andrew? Wave if you can hear me.
Got it. Okay, now I can unmute. One of the reasons I was muted, I have to say, is because I have young children in the background who are occasionally shrieking. So didn't want to ruin the ambiance. But, you know, I think that's a great question. I don't know that I've fully worked that out in my own mind. I have not written anything that alludes to COVID myself in my fiction at this point. You know, I think I've been, you know, initially I was kind of writing with the assumption that this would hopefully be over soon and the world would go back to normal, and it would just be kind of a little blip. Now it's extended to a longer period of time, and it seems hard not to kind of acknowledge it. So I'm kind of not sure at this point. The stuff that I'm working on now, none of it references COVID. But I would love to hear how others are thinking.
I'm trying to make sure that no one is muted here, but maybe bungling this up. Are people able to unmute themselves?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to. I'm going to try that again to see if yep, sorry. I'm sort of bouncing around here, but anyway, if anybody would like to say any more pertaining to that question or any others, please wave or jump up and down if we see you.
Renee, you're not muted. Can you tell us about dealing with COVID in your work?
Say that again.
I'm sorry.
Ask that again, please.
I was just asking Nan, because she's unmuted, if she is dealing with COVID in her work or not.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you the first time. Well, I am with Andrew. I think I thought that it would go away. I'm working on a novel too, and it's for the most part set in the past. So it hasn't been a problem. I have, as of today, started a prologue that is present, I think. So I have to, you've raised the issue for me. I don't, in that particular instance, I don't think it will be a part of it because it's only a brief glimpse. It's not an issue that would be relevant to the story. But I'm also, I'm revising a set of short stories, and one of the short stories I have to go back and look at because I think that will be an issue. I just need to get this revision of the novel done first, and then I will go and look at that. In the meantime, aren't we supposed to have a vaccine coming in like December? I think Fauci said April, we should all have it. So, you know, I don't know. The last time I was with a group of writers over a Zoom session, I did raise this point because, as Austin mentioned, was seeing on television, especially the commercials, you know, where people are really very physically involved with each other and all in crowds. It looks odd. It makes me uncomfortable because I've become so accustomed to hibernating in my home and worrying about the zombie virus outside my door. So yeah, it's an issue. And especially if yours is in the future, you might need to talk to more health experts about what they, more research about what they think it's going to be, which it's fun. I mean, I'm with you. I've done a lot of research on the internet that has served me well. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, fortunately, with long form fiction, you'll have some time to know how to deal with this. Anyway, I didn't want to veer away from Mary Helen. I think other people should ask other questions because COVID is really a big uncertainty and looms very large right now, but hopefully will be the blip that Andrew mentioned.
Are there any other comments or questions? I mean, I think all of us, Mary Helen, are really looking forward to reading your work when it's published. Yeah. We're excited about it, especially hearing you read it. So if there are no other, I want to be mindful of people's time. Just let me thank the advisory committee for helping this residency be what it is. It's Barbara Ross, Stephen Kelman, Andrew Porter, Nan Cuba, Norma Cantu, and Jen Acker. I want to thank Robert Pacina, who helped put these emails and getting things out to everybody. And also I want to thank JJ Ortiz in the Dimmitt County Public Library, who normally we have these readings there, and he's very supportive of the residency and having the readings. And I guess a very unintended consequence of COVID is we sort of pushed this along and thought about Zoom. So it's allowed a lot of people who wouldn't have normally been able to come to Carrizo or aren't in that area to attend this. And I think that's really cool. So maybe we'll continue with the Zoom and hopefully get back to the readings at the Dimmitt County Public Library for the local community, as well as the Carrizo Springs Public High School, which we had a very successful one last year with Christopher Merrill, and then unfortunately COVID struck. So, and of course, I want to thank all the residents who've made the residency the success that it is. So thank you all very much.
I'd like to thank you for doing this. The pleasure that we all are having right now takes me back to when we first talked about this idea. And here it is in fruition, and it's an absolutely wonderful job. So.
Thank you, Michael. The meeting I had with you up at the W Istana was quite instrumental in crystallizing some of my thoughts. So thank you very much for that and for your continued support and interest. So if there's no other thoughts, thanks very much. And we'll carry on, and for the next reading, whenever we get our next resident in.
We have to have the finale, which is.
Hey! Yes.
Thank you, Mary Helen.
Thank you, Mary Helen.
Thank you, Alston. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Alston and Holly.
Very nice.
Awesome.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.